On February 11th, 1991, 2 days before Mardi Gras in Sulphur, Louisiana, a husband and wife couple slept together in their bed. Their 18-month-old infant daughter cooed in her crib. The idyllic young family were completely unaware of the 4 teenage boys that crept into their home and rummaged through their things. The teenagers would say it was just a burglary that went wrong, but rumors in town said that it was something far worse and much, much more sinister. By the dawn of the next day, Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday, Eric and Pam Ellender would be dead, lying in a pool of their own blood. Their daughter, Erica, would be left alone and crying in her crib, her belly empty, her diaper soiled, wondering why her parents abandoned her. In recent years, news media has begun to reevaluate and deconstruct the Satanic Panic, a bout of mass hysteria that afflicted the United States for over a decade. But what if it wasn't just hysteria? What if some of it was true? Ritual Rewind brings you into the darkest corners of the 1980s, uncovering the crimes, conspiracies, and occult fears that shaped a generation. Tonight, we rewind it back to 1991 and dive into the murders of Eric and Pam Ellender at the hands of a demonic teenage gang known as the S.K.A.T.E.R.S, Satan's kids against the establishment. It's the case of the Devil and the S.K.A.T.E.R.S. I'm your host, Drew, and you're listening to The Ritual Rewind.
It was Mardi Gras Day 1991 when the bodies of Pam and Eric Ellender were found in their home off Highway 90. Their 18-month-old daughter was left alone in the house with her murdered parents. Gary Littleton was Pam's older brother and remembers so vividly.
When you have a tragedy, especially like a murder, at a young age like they were, the loss exceeds what it just them passing away. It's a loss for a lot of people for a long time. You know, it's tough. But everybody's going to meet the good Lord one day. And I'm confident that in the end of time, when everybody gets called to go home, they're going to be judged by what they did. And I'm at peace that justice is going to be served one day.
According to History.com, Mardi Gras is a tradition that dates back thousands of years to the pagan festival of Lupercalia, which celebrates spring and fertility. It was a bloody, violent, and sexually charged celebration with animals sacrificed and a feast in hopes of warding off evil spirits and infertility. The first American Mardi Gras took place in 1699 when French explorers landed near New Orleans. They dubbed their Louisiana landing spot Port du Mardi Gras, and Louisiana is the only state in which Mardi Gras is a legal holiday. Sulphur, Louisiana was a quiet, idyllic community, a perfect place to raise a family. And that's exactly what 27-year-old Eric and 25-year-old Pam Ellender intended to do. It was a storybook romance. They had met in high school, where Pam had been a cheerleader and homecoming queen. She came from a well-to-do family. Her father, Huey Littleton, was an insurance investigator and self-made millionaire. He had provided a comfortable life for himself and his family. And Pam dreamed of one day becoming a housewife and stay-at-home mom, just like her mother Joyce, where she could raise a brood of children. And she found the man that would provide that life for her in Eric Ellender. Eric had graduated from Louisiana Tech with a business degree, and the couple were married in 1988. A year later, they had a daughter they named Erica. Eric worked for his father-in-law as an insurance investigator and hoped that if he followed in the footsteps of Pam's father, he too could provide a comfortable life for his wife and growing family. On the days when Eric and Huey were at work, Pam would take their young daughter and go to her parents' house, which neighbored their own, and there she would spend the day with her mother, Joyce. Pam's father, Huey, said this of his daughter: her ambition her whole life was to be a housewife and a mother, and to have a little girl. Eric and Pam were living that dream. We were all living that dream. But that dream would be shattered by 18-year-old Chris Prudhomme. Chris Prudhomme was a high school dropout and was well known to local law enforcement, having been arrested for burglary and frequent drug use. Many people that went to high school with Chris recalled him as being a pervert and a jerk, and many wanted nothing to do with him. But Chris wasn't a loner. He did have a close-knit group of friends that consisted of Robert Atkins, Robert Masick, Sean Moody, Kurt Reese, and Kim Manuel. They shared a passion for skateboarding, heavy metal music, psychedelics, and the fantasy role-playing game, Dungeons & Dragons, in which they would create elaborate and often extremely violent campaigns. Allegations would later suggest that they were also members of a satanic cult known as the S.K.A.T.E.R.S, an acronym for Satan's Kids Against the Establishment. And as their name would suggest, their group consisted mainly of skateboarding teenagers and was led by a kid named Philip Ledoux. On the night of the murders, Chris reportedly watched the film Helter Skelter, which was a 2-part miniseries about Charles Manson that aired on CBS in 1976. And at around 8:45 p.m., Pam, who was at her mother's house with her daughter Erica, received a phone call from her husband. Eric was just notifying her that he had finished his work and had returned home. A few minutes later, Pam said goodnight to her parents and kissed them goodbye. She then took Erica into her arms and walked the short distance back to her own home. And it would be the last time her parents, Huey and Joyce, would see their daughter alive. What happened next is a mix of conflicting stories, conspiracy theories, and misremembering from those that participated in this heinous crime. But it is believed that the murder occurred around 10 p.m. that night. Chris and Robert Atkins hadn't initially intended to murder Eric and Pam, only to burglarize their home. But they were high on LSD, and things got out of control. According to Atkins, they had been searching the house for valuables when they stumbled across Eric's gun cabinet. Chris took the shotgun, but even then, they hadn't yet intended to kill. But then, they entered the Ellenders' bedroom. Pam was the first to wake up. She did so with such a fright that it startled Chris, and instinctively, he shot her. It was nearly at point-blank range. His wife's scream and the blast of the shotgun woke up Eric. He didn't stand a chance. Chris shot him too. That left little Erica alone in her crib, wailing. Chris wanted to shoot her too, but Atkins stopped him. It was one step too far, even for him. Well, that was not the end of it for the Ellenders. One more degrading act would be forced upon them before the night was over. As their bodies lay rotting in the pool of their own blood, Chris and Atkins sexually assaulted them. Afterwards, Atkins and Chris stole the couple's Toyota 4Runner and fled the scene. The following morning, the day of Mardi Gras, Chris drove to the home of his friend, Jason Laughlin. He eagerly confessed to the burglary and theft of the 4Runner. This revelation neither shocked nor surprised Laughlin. It was just something Chris did with some frequency. As the day wore on, Pam's mother Joyce began to grow increasingly concerned about her daughter and grandchild, as they hadn't arrived at her home that morning, as they so often did. Yet for some reason, Pam's mother did not travel to the short distance to the daughter's home. Instead, Pam's grandmother, Neela Haywood, went to Pam's home to look for her, and she found Pam's car parked in the driveway. However, when Neela rang the doorbell, no one answered the door. Neela could hear the cries of the 18-month-old baby Erica inside the home, and she panicked. She broke into the home and went in search of Pam and Eric. But what she found would haunt her for the remainder of her life. Pam and Erica dead in their bed. But luckily for Erica, she was untouched. Neela called her son-in-law Huey Littleton, Pam's father, to tell him what she had discovered and asked for him to call the sheriff.
She says, "Huey, I just left Pam and Eric's, and something's wrong down there. They're in their bed. I have the baby and I'm back at your house. Call the sheriff." I told her, I said, "I will call the sheriff and I will call an ambulance. What appears to be the problem?" She said, "Call the sheriff."
Huey rushed home to the scene of the crime, and by the time that he arrived, the Ellenders' home was swarming with over 40 sheriff's deputies, as well as a television news crew. Huey was told not to enter the home, and so he waited outside until the bodies of his daughter and son-in-law were brought out by paramedics. Huey approached the paramedics and asked for a moment alone with his children. He took each of them by the foot and swore an oath to them that day. "Kids, I don't know what happened, and I don't know why, but I promise you that I will find out." It wasn't long after that Chris Prudhomme was arrested. On February 13th, the day after the bodies were discovered, while driving near the Louisiana State University campus in Baton Rouge, 135 miles from Sulphur, Chris was arrested by Officer Rocky Ricks, along with Robert Atkins, Robert Meska, and Sean Moody, for being in possession of the Ellender's stolen 4Runner. Chris was transported back to Sulphur and charged with first-degree murder. While at the police station, Chris crossed paths with Jason Laughlin again, and reportedly told him, "I'm gonna be fried for this." But Chris would never face trial. 17 days later, Chris hung himself in the shower at the correctional facility and was later discovered by inmates hanging from a noose. Chris was rushed to the hospital and held in the ICU for over a week until his parents decided to remove him from life support. Found in Chris's cell was a suicide note. It read, "By the time you read this, I shall be dead, in which case I will not be able to testify in court to the innocence of Robert Atkins and Robert Masick. The main reason for my death is to hopefully ensure that they receive their freedom. It is possible that the court could find them guilty for accessory after the fact, but neither of them knew positively of any actions and had no reason to believe it." Chris signed off by saying, "I enjoyed very much in the taking of those two individual lives." Though Sheriff Wayne McElvin said that Chris's death would not be the end of the investigation, in effect it was. The sheriff ceased investigations shortly after. But Pam's father, Huey, believed there was too many loose ends left hanging and insisted that more be done about the case. He was rebuffed at every point and decided to take on the investigation himself. Almost immediately after the murders, rumors began to swirl that the skaters were accomplices in the murders. A friend of the skaters, Nikki Alderson, was one of the first to come forward to Huey. She claimed that in the early morning of February 12th, only hours after the murders, she drove by the Ellender's house and noticed a party going on inside the home. She stopped when she recognized one of the cars parked in the driveway. She said she saw at least a dozen people inside and outside the residence drinking and doing drugs. She said that she got weird vibes from the situation and claims not to have been aware of the murders until the following day when she saw it on the local news. Two other teenagers who had not attended the party, Chip Richard and Bobby Stoddard, claimed to have seen videotapes of the murder and watched multiple people molest the bodies of the Ellenders while at the party.
Those claims are verified by this man, Chip Richard. Chip told Huey that although he was not at the Ellender house, he had seen videotapes which were made that night.
I've seen one, and I've talked to a couple other people that's seen them. To me, every one of them the people I've talked to that's seen them, it's all the same. They show on the video, what I saw on the video was the people killing the Ellenders, having sexual contact with them, just basically everything that really goes on,
They witnessed Chris hand off the shotgun to skater leader Philip Ledoux, who was allegedly the one that actually murdered Eric and Pam. According to Atkins, Chris never killed anyone. It was decided at a meeting between the skaters at their hangout the following day that Chris would accept sole responsibility for the murders to protect the rest of the members of the group. Chris agreed to this because he believed it to be the most noble thing to do. Over the course of his 7-year investigation, Huey contended that over 50 people told him that multiple devil worshippers were in his daughter's home in the hours after the murder. He presented this information to Sheriff McElvin. Despite the overwhelming evidence, McElveen refused to investigate further, claiming that the case was closed. Some believe that this was because McElveen's son Richard was accused of being in attendance at the party held inside the Ellenders' home. The sheriff remained silent on the matter, but his office responded with this. This office is aware of no credible evidence placing any of Sheriff McElveen's sons at the Ellender home. Huey's investigation was not for nothing. It led to a grand jury investigation and multiple indictments and convictions. Robert Atkins was indicted for the murders on February 9, 1995, 4 years after they took place. Philip Ledoux and Kurt Reese were charged as associates after the fact. Atkins entered a plea of 2 counts of manslaughter and was sentenced to 2 20-year terms to run concurrently. However, the sentence was suspended, and Atkins was placed on 5 years probation. Philip Ledoux was found guilty of being an accessory after the fact and was sentenced to 4 years in prison.
I'm at peace with what I'm doing because we're doing the right thing. There's a lot of people out there that don't have the resources nor the knowledge to do what I've done had they lost their child. So I represent those people. I represent my daughter. I represent my son-in-law and their child. We just want to see those that participated in the murders of Eric and Pam, in the cover-up, and the destruction of evidence brought to justice. Justice under the law.
Thank you for joining us tonight on the Ritual Rewind. I'm looking to grow this podcast, so if you like it, please rate it and review it. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, give it a like and a comment. And as always, you can interact with us at The Ritual Rewind on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Thank you, and good night.